morning, boy. Hey, hey, honey, I got a letter this morning, boy. Hey, hey, honey.
For nearly 200 years, Americans have ridden the rails. They've been our lifeline between East and West, acting as both a conduit for commerce and a gateway to growth and expansion, an inescapable piece of our nation's history. In 1851, the Pacific Railroad broke ground near St. Louis, heading west in their grand effort to reach the Pacific Ocean. And a small city named Warrensburg was eager to be a part of that new growth. Two prominent local citizens, Colonel B.W. Grover and Major N.B. Holden, were vocal advocates for the area, fighting to ensure that the new rail line would intersect both Warrensburg and other nearby communities on its way to Kansas City. But the great dreams of a Western railroad expansion would be dimmed under the darkening cloud of a civil war. Guerrilla attacks, both in Missouri and throughout the country, created havoc, often crippling existing railway lines and threatening to derail future growth. Sadly, American infrastructure wasn't the only casualty of the growing war. Families across the nation mourned as soldiers and civilians were killed by the tens of thousands, consumed by a conflict that brought death to so many. Among those who lost their lives during this time were the outspoken railway advocates, Colonel Grover and Major Holden. Grover, a Union colonel, was seriously wounded during the battle at Lexington and would eventually pass away in St. Louis on October 30, 1861. Major Holden would outlive Colonel Grover by only a matter of months when he was roused from his bed and assassinated in the middle of the night on September 21, 1862. They would never see the trains they had hoped for coming down the tracks they had championed. It wasn't until July of 1864, 13 years after laying the first tracks in St. Louis, that the Pacific Railroad would finally reach the burgeoning city of Warrensburg. To accommodate the arrival of the railroad, the Warrensburg train depot was built in 1865. This new building would serve as the community's link to a wider world for nearly a quarter of a century, until a fire broke out in 1889 and burned the station to the ground. Undaunted, the depot would be rebuilt the same year, this time from locally quarried sandstone, and it remains standing to this day, though the doors haven't always been open. For years, railway passenger traffic had been on the decline, and in March of 1972, Amtrak made the decision to stop funding depot operations. After serving the community for over 80 years, the stone building would abruptly close to the public, and passengers weren't the only ones left out in the cold. With only 5 days' notice, and with no apparent reason given at the time, permanent employees of the depot were informed that their jobs would no longer exist, and the depot doors would remain shut for years. Until a group of community members decided it was time for a change.
My name is David Pierce, and I was serving as Executive Vice President of the Warrensburg Chamber of Commerce, and I had the honor of being with the Chamber when the depot was renovated. I grew up in Warrensburg, and as a kid, I just remember the depot being closed and boarded up, and really just being an eyesore. It wasn't any place you wanted to go see. People just ignored it. And so it's just a real thrill to be a part of seeing it be renovated and be a real crown jewel for the community.
We also had, at the time, local leaders that realized that in order for their businesses to grow, they had to invest in the community. And this became, renovating the depot became a symbol of reinvesting in Warrensburg and rescuing a declining downtown.
Because anytime someone gives to a project, they have ownership in it. They have pride in it. And so if you give something to a project, then you always feel like it's part of you.
The key was getting the right people on the board who could reach out to the community. And we had those people like Avis Tucker, who owned the newspaper, people like Dr. Marshall Lederer, who was a beloved retired physician in town. And when you got a call from one of those people, you took the call, and you responded to their request. So we had a gala where we opened the campaign. I talked the committee into all putting on railroad stripe bib overalls and caps, and renovating the depot became a symbol of reinvesting in Warrensburg and rescuing a declining downtown. So many small communities like Warrensburg, their old central business district is dead.
Well, I look at what would happen if we didn't do it. It's one of two things. It would be an eyesore, it would be boarded up, it would be something to be ashamed of, or possibly even torn down. And that would have been a tragedy to lose something like this historical. And so you look at, if we hadn't have done it, where would we be now? And right now, it's a beautiful facility. The Warrensburg Chamber of Commerce uses it. It's right by City Hall. Groups get to use it, and I think one of the best parts, it's a waiting area for Amtrak. And so Amtrak gets the benefit of that. Our passengers, friends, and family get to use it. And so it's a real showpiece. And so I think that's the beauty of it.
The dedication day, it was an incredible celebration. We had a big parade. We had United States Senator Kit Bond, who had been governor, and U.S. Congressman Ike Skelton, both here, officials from, the state and the Amtrak and Union Pacific Railroad. It was a big deal, and so a great celebration for our community.
I keep a diary, and I've done it for years and years, and so I kept a diary in 1992, which is when we dedicated the depot, and it was on Saturday, April 11th. So I'll just read a little bit from that day. It poured early in the morning. Got my feet soaked going to the depot. Had a reception for the major donors before they boarded the train. The train people had a great time, but the rain stopped by 9:30, which was when we started our parade. It was a glorious event, right out of a Hollywood movie. The bands played, people sang, a fun event. As we were cutting the ribbon, it began to rain again. And then the next day I wrote in my diary what a wonderful day the grand opening was. So that was from April 11th, 1992. It's just one of those memories you'll never forget. And there was 1,000 people here, and it was just a really, really special event for Warrensburg.
We are part of what's called MORPAC, Missouri Railroad Passenger Advisory Committee. Through that process, we're in communication with and partners with other Amtrak stops in Missouri, like Lee Summit and Sedalia and Herman and Washington and so forth. And Warrensburg is a leader in that community.
I guess one of the neat things is just some of the wonderful people you get to work with, that people share a dream, they share a vision. Depot Renovation Board, they were fantastic community leaders, and a lot of them aren't here today, but their work still remains. And I think that's why people contribute to projects like this, so their legacy continues for the benefit of the community.
In September of 1865, the westward line that broke ground so many years ago near St. Louis would finally join with the tracks heading east from Kansas City, forming what is now known as the Missouri River Runner, a line that today creates more than 1,200 jobs and generates over $200 million in economic activity statewide. And Warrensburg is proud that both their depot and community can be a part of it. In fact, some suggest that the latest chapter of the Warrensburg train depot could also be seen as the story of the heart of the downtown community itself. A community that decided to invest heavily in a project that others may have been hesitant to support. They placed a bet on a dilapidated structure built over 100 years ago, and in a way, they also placed a bet on themselves. And it looks like it was a bet that paid off. Today, downtown Warrensburg is active and vibrant. In a time when many cities have lost much of their local character, Warrensburg seems to have found the secret formula for revitalization and longevity. A formula that some believe began decades ago with the renovation of a nearly disregarded train depot. It seems that over a century and a half later, the great rail lines and infrastructure that helped fuel the growth of a young nation might just be doing the same thing today.